The Russian Revolution is now seen under new light. Without a doubt, the success of the Bolsheviks in the Civil War was ultimately due to their extraordinary ability to build the state, an ability that their adversaries lacked. 337 Those who called attention to this question were, in the Russia of 1918, some of the declared enemies of the Bolsheviks. Pavel Milyukov recognized their merit in having known how to re-establish the state. Vasily Miklikov went further. The new government has begun restoring the state apparatus, re-establishing order, and combating chaos. On this front the Bolsheviks have shown energy, and, I'll add, undeniable skill. 338 3 years later, in a conservative American newspaper, we can read that, Lenin is the only man in Russia who has the power to maintain order. If he were toppled, only chaos would reign. 339 The revolutionary dictatorship born out of the October Revolution performed a national function as well. Gramsci understood this well when, in July of 1919, he celebrates the Bolsheviks as protagonists of a great revolution, but also for having shown their revolutionary greatness in the form of a leadership group made up of excellent statesmen, capable therefore of saving the entire nation from the catastrophe caused by the old regime and the old ruling class. A year later, Lenin himself would indirectly reference this in a polemic against extremism, stressing that the revolution is impossible without a crisis of the entire nation. The political force that demonstrates its ability to resolve that conflict is the one which conquers hegemony and achieves victory. 340 It's on these grounds that Alexei Brusilov, a brilliant general of noble origin who tried in vain to save his officers driven to suicide by the savage violence of revolting peasant soldiers, joins the side of Soviet Russia. My sense of duty to my nation has often forced me to disobey my natural social inclinations. 341 A few years later, in 1927, while offering an overview of Moscow, Walter Benjamin stressed the strong national identity which Bolshevism has developed among all Russians, without exceptions. 342 Soviet power had achieved a new identity and a new self-esteem for a nation not only terribly tested, but also in some ways lost and adrift, without any solid reference point. However, the crisis of the entire Russian nation hadn't truly ended. It had exploded with all its violence in 1914, but with a long period of incubation behind it. At times it is defined as a second time of troubles, in an analogy to the crisis that raged in 17th-century Russia. 343 The struggle between claimants to the throne develops and combines with the economic crisis and peasant revolt, and with the intervention of foreign powers. It escalates in the 20th century to a conflict between a number of actors claiming political legitimacy. According to Weber's classic tripartite, traditional power follows the Tsar's family to the grave, even if this or that general desperately seeks to recover it. Charismatic power, already weakened after the difficult conflict sparked by the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, doesn't survive Lenin's death. Finally, legal power finds great difficulty in asserting itself, after a revolution that triumphs with an ideology marked by the utopian idea of the state's extinction in a country where the hatred of the peasants for their masters is traditionally expressed in violent, anti-statist terms. To the extent that a charismatic power was still possible, its most likely realization took shape in the figure of Trotsky, the great organizer of the Red Army, brilliant speaker and writer, who sought to embody the hopes for the victory of the world revolution, and thereby legitimize his aspirations of governing the party and the state. Stalin, however, embodied traditional legal power which tried to solidify itself with great effort. Different from Trotsky, who arrived late to Bolshevism, Stalin represented historical continuity for the party that led the revolution, and was therefore the holder of the new legality. Moreover, affirming that socialism could be achieved in one country, Stalin gave new dignity and identity to the Russian nation, thus overcoming the frightening crisis, ideological but also economic, suffered after the defeat and chaos of the First World War, to find historical continuity at last. But for that very reason his adversaries denounced him for treason, while for Stalin and his supporters the traitors were those who, with their adventurism, facilitated the intervention of foreign powers, and in the last analysis, put in danger the survival of the Russian nation that was at this time the vanguard of the revolutionary cause. The clash between Stalin and Trotsky is the conflict not only between two political programs, but also between two forms of legitimacy. For all these reasons, the second time of troubles ended not with the defeat of the supporters of the old regime, or with the defeat of the intervention by counter-revolutionary foreign powers as is often thought, but with the end of the Third Civil War, and also with the end of the conflict between the two opposing forms of legitimacy, therefore not in 1921, but in 1937. Despite the fact that the rise of the Romanov dynasty meant the end of the time of troubles, 17th-century Russia found its definitive consolidation only with the crowning of Peter the Great, after having passed through its most acute phase in the years following the outbreak of the First World War until the end of the Entente's intervention. The second time of troubles ends with Stalin's consolidation of power and the industrialization and westernization pushed forward by him in preparation for the approaching war.